easily.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, FCM community. It is your yearly draft recap podcast. At the moment, it is myself, Maddie, and Hokie. We're here to go through the first round of the most recent FCM draft. And then maybe delve into picks that we liked in the second round and beyond. A couple other people will be in and out during this podcast, so we will expand from we three to potentially we five or potentially we six. Gilly was in then out again. Something that probably happens quite a lot in the Gilly household. Mike, or Wi-Fi, as most people know him, he will be on once his kids are put to bed to give his help for this podcast. And PR, once he gets home, as long as he doesn't find a big bag of pot along the way, will be jumping on as well, probably around the top of the hour. So we will get started in lieu of none of the rest of them being here because it's late already and I'm old and I'm going to need to go to bed at a reasonable time so I can wake up early to walk on my treadmill. So with the first overall pick this year, the Chicago White Sox took Russell Braithwaite, a 20-year-old left-handed throwing and hitting right fielder. This is a guy that, had I the first overall pick, probably the guy that I take too. This is the guy that we've seen taken, the type of guy we've seen taken, I think, a lot with a top overall pick where there's not a speed guy on the board like there wasn't this year. Most recently, I think a guy that looked relatively similar to this is the gentleman that went to Arizona, Lee Strauss, who didn't turn out quite as well as everybody thought he would. Still playing well, just didn't quite turn out as well. But I'm a pretty big fan of Braithwaite. I think he's definitely got that home run power. And being a lefty bat and the way that his build looks out, he's just going to mash the ball. And with a pretty good glove as well, good arm, decent range and fielding. He's going to play a pretty good outfield position too. So definitely down with Braithwaite going number one overall. Maddie, what'd you think?
Yes. No.
And
Yeah. I think he's the type of bat that you would look for. The guys who have been successful have shown up, shown themselves in the file. And if we're really gonna look at it versus him or a speed guy, yeah, I'm definitely gonna take him over like a Ben Cool. The impact that a number 3 hitter has is much better than some guy that's gonna decline pretty quickly. Those speed builds tend to.
yeah, I agree. I prefer a little bit of power sometimes over a little bit of speed. Not that I don't want the speed too, but you're right. Those high speed, high position guys, the shortstop, second base guys types, have tend to be not doing as well long term as some of these other guys. Hokie, what do you got?
Yeah, I kind of agree. He, to me, was kind of a no-brainer. I tried to acquire the first overall pick to draft him. That did not work, but he's got power. He's got an eye. His contact's not well below his overall, and he's got fielding capability. So he's going to be in that top three. And when you look at the age, so from 19 to 20, he dropped from 94 peak to 93 peak. So it's not like it's looks like it's going to be a disaster. Now, what I would say is sometimes when you get these type of builds, they don't jump. Like for whatever reason, it's like the game doesn't like to jump somebody that's already so high overall in that first year. So really, the telling question about him is going to be if he doesn't jump and he turns to 21 and basically has 2 years of being 76 overall, how does that really make him look? And I'm not saying like you don't draft him because of that. I'm just saying I think there is that potential just from what I've seen in the past. But as of right now, he is the best outfielder in this draft.
Mike, this is your pick. Why don't you tell us why you took him?
He got
So close. We were so close to smoothly transitioning into the next guy. Well, while Wi-Fi fixes his mic or whatever the issue tends to be, we will move on to the second pick. The second pick was Baltimore, taking Brant Maisner, Mainzer, excuse me, a right-handed pup. Didn't necessarily would have taken 2 overall. When I saw the name pop up, I'm like going after those ground ball guys like he and TQ in Houston um, for all of those years. So it didn't surprise me. So definitely get why this pick should be a pretty good player. I mean, where he stacks up against some of the other pitchers that were drafted this year. But Hokie, what do you have?
So I traded down from second to third pick and ended up getting a free third rounder with that. And after I did that, he told me that he was looking at Mainzer and Sarita. And for me, Mainzer looks good, but I have never had good luck personally with that 18 gap between overall and peak or upside. Um, so I kind of feel like he's going to jump very quickly and just kind of level out. So you may not see him at like, even 88 overall. He might end up being like in that 85, 84. And with the vitals the way that they are, he's going to be a good pitcher. But I don't think he's going to be a stellar pitcher. So I know when PR and I were talking, I kind of said that I liked him, hoping that that kind of led him towards that and not Sarita. But yeah, I think he's going to be a good pitcher. I just don't think he's going to be the best pitcher in the draft. And when you had the second overall pick, I that's what I would go towards. So I think he does appear to not give up a ton of home runs. His on base average is relatively low throughout, um, and he pitches a decent amount of innings. So yeah, he's and good fastball. So lots of good pieces. It's just whether or not he hits that overall.
Well, Mike either really likes this pick or hates this pick. Mike, which is it? We can hear you now. And then he was silent. All right, Maddie.
Yeah, I really like him. He has that kind of build. You're gonna see him have really good control and great movement. I don't think you can really gauge much on his numbers because of where his overall and vitals are. It's just probably just a lot of product, very, very advanced. But you like the ground ball rate. He's gonna be a lower homer guy, but that the one season it could be a telling sign. Who knows? We'll see eventually. But I think this is a guy that you figure he had 14 upside. It's not a lot, like Hoagie said. So that could be a sign that he doesn't have long to develop. But you never know. He could be one of those guys that only falls 2 or 3 points every year, and that would probably give him any from 5 to 7 years to develop. That's probably good enough to get him at a clip. My projections have him at close to 90 movement, easily or close to 90s control, and easily 90s movement. If he does get the 90 control and movement, I think he'll be.
Yeah. All right. Hopefully, Mike will hear us and chip in when he is able to. Until then, we will continue to move on. With the third pick overall this year, Toronto took Bert Serreta, who I think many people would say is a pitcher that a lot of people liked. A couple issues that I know I see right off the bat with him, and that is those home runs. The last 2 years of high school there, they started to get a little bit uppity. But I think that when you compare them to the ERA, the actual earned runs, I mean, they're almost a 2-for-1. So even if they were home runs, they don't seem to be big blasts. I mean, they look like solo or 2-run shots. And I know a lot of people are going to give me crap for that. There's Dave already. So it is one of those things that I just think, when I see a higher home run total but a lower earned run total, I'm even less worried than I normally am. But when you look at this pitcher, I mean, there's definitely some things like he's got a big power arm. Got a good control. Movements just below his overall. Two good pitches, a sinker and a fastball, and a nice third pitch. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses and what type of pitcher he ends up being. If he ends up being more of that, which I think he's going to be, that more control first, and then power movement second. Second, third, obviously, but kind of pitcher. Those kind of pitchers are pitchers that I always want to like, and just tend to not work out for me. I don't know if it's my park. I don't know if I just don't give them enough of a chance. But I'm not 100% sure on how they sort themselves out. Sometimes you get a Samuel Zinga who just pitches very, very well, and sometimes you get a guy like the gentleman that is over with the Mets currently, from formerly of the Gillies, in a oh God, where the hell did he go? He was there when I looked last time. He's somewhere down in the minors because that's how bad he became. Mark Dittmer, just a guy that is a consummate mid-4 ERA guy with a high control and then movement power that just never quite pulls it together. So, we'll see what happens as this goes. But I mean, I like the pick as it sits right now, though I am worried about how he finesses out toward the end. So PR's here, so we're going to let PR come in and talk about his pick briefly, and then the pick that he didn't make that Hokie took right after him. So PR, we'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Mainzer is obviously my kind of guy, so that's really all I have to say about that. That's the guy I'm going to take every time. But as for Sarita, I thought that if I didn't take Mainzer, this was the guy I would take. He reminds me a lot of obviously Junior Patrick, kind of Henrik Basham over there in Houston. Obviously that the home runs were a little bit on edge, but he did get I believe, a jump, which is also always a good sign for a draftee. That sometimes, like I think Maddie has said previously, it's just sometimes you'll get those draftees, they don't jump that first year. You can't really bank on that. But seeing that Sarita has, his development is definitely projecting the right way. So I really think that all the pitchers in this draft, Sarita has the best chance of being that 90s guy. And it sucks that he went to Toronto.
If only you could have taken him a pick before. So yes, he was a 62.89 at year start. He's now a 65.91, so he did get a little jump in there. Maddie, what did you think about this pitcher?
Yeah, not really a huge fan of him. I can't find a good comp for him. Honestly, maybe the former Blue Jays Omichi might be a pretty good comp for him. He's a guy who can have some pretty good years, but when either the opponent's batting average or the home runs are high, he's just not going to be that good. The control is obviously there, but just the gap in that to his movement and how that projects to develop just concerns me. That's not going to catch up enough. And with seeing that 10 and 14 spot in the homer his junior and senior year, just thinking that it's just going to be a problem.
Okay, this was your pick.
Yeah. I mean, I do definitely see some of the potential issues with him, but when I looked at a potential comp of a player taken that was similar to him, I look at like Juan Valentine that I drafted when I was in Florida. Um, Valentine was definitely a little bit worse than what Sarita is right now, but has some similar features when you look at him. And he didn't really ever jump. Like he started 59, 88, and ended up being like 82 overall, and uh, just hasn't had a great career by any standpoint. But then I look at the flip side, and there are a lot of pitchers set up like that have been like 93, 90, 90 when you look at it, right? And I think when you look at him, especially if he gets a winter ball, that's positive. There's lots of time. He's only 17, so I mean, he's gonna have his birthday. Probably will drop back down to like that 88, 89 peak. But there's a lot of potential for him to grow. And at the end of the day, yeah, maybe he gives up some home runs, but if he's not going to let a bunch of people on base because of walks and different things like that, then a lot of those might become solos. So I think there's that. Also, the fact that his sinker is the same overall as his fastball, and although he has 40% ground ball, I also kind of feel like he does keep the ball down a little bit more. So I do think that he has the potential to be a very good pitcher. And at the end of the day, Mogul does what Mogul does, but uh, I really do think that he has the best potential to be an ace. There's a lot of other pitchers here that are very good, and um, you know, Maddie drafted one of them. Uh, who, you know, the thing is, they would, if they didn't have a flaw, they would be first pick. And even at first pick, there's certain flaws, but yeah, Sarita is my type of pitcher every day.
All right, moving on to the fourth overall pick. This is another White Sox pick, and the White Sox take Mike Alexis, another 19-year-old left-handed hitting and throwing left fielder, and another bat that I like quite a bit. A big glove. I mean, this is a guy that could probably play center field. Speed's a little bit maybe too low for what you really want to see in center field. Could definitely play out there. If not, should be a phenomenal left fielder. And a guy that just is going to hit. He's going to get high contact. He's going to have a good eye. He'll probably have a little bit of power and a little bit of speed to go with it. I think that he ends up being a very useful player. I mean, just a guy that I put right in my two hole and just let him just hit in front of those guys that with all the power that are going to come behind him. Like he's going to have a little bit of power himself, which is great. But I really like the way that his bat projects. I like the fact that he has a glove. I love what Chicago does in this draft. I think these two picks. Granted, he had pick 1 and 4. So when you have pick 1 and 4, you want to be loved for what you did in that draft. You don't want to be like, ooh, they had pick 1 and 4 and look what they did. But I really like the direction that they take in this draft, and I think these two picks at the top were just great picks by him. So, okay, let's go to you first this time. What did you think about Alexis?
Well, if he dropped one more pick, he would have been taken at 5. So yeah, I definitely like him. Um, I actually had some hope that with Braithwaite going to Chicago, that Alexis would drop, and he did not. I think he's more of my style outfielder that has the high contact and a little bit lower power. It's more of what I look for than a lower contact, high power guy. And I think that he's going to be just an absolute basher when you look at the team that Y guy usually makes. So I think the fact that he has already got 2 corner pieces of his outfield is going to help him quite a lot. And in some ways, I think he is going to look a little bit more like a Castaneda style player, but without the speed. So yeah, I think Chicago did pretty good here. I know that Chicago was a little interested in Toland, um, so either way, ended up getting somebody that I liked.
Maddie, what'd you think?
Mm, on one hand, I like him, and on the other hand, I don't like him. Simply because of how his build is set up. Obviously, the contacts shoot past the power pretty quickly. But the one thing to note is that contact projects to be very, very good. How good will really cement just how valuable be. He's a low strikeout guy, so that is another area of tiny concern. The way our file is gone is not as much of an issue anymore, but it's still something where I think it's still just be one of those guys that you think's gonna hit. I don't know. I'll say you think he might hit like 325 and he's hitting like 300. Still good. You'll obviously take it, but you'd obviously rather have the guy who's hitting 325. I think in the end, I guess my concern would be that he might be like a Brett Alexander without the pretty nice power, whereas like Alexander was like a 25 to 30 homer guy. Alexis might be sitting around like 20 homer, which is still solid with that build. If he does hit over 300, he'll be fine. But I think the overall impact, there's obviously some risk there, and we'll just see if he is like a Archiega style of contact guy. If he's there, if he's not, it might just be solid and great.
PR, anything on this guy?
Well, besides everything that was already covered, I thought that he was probably one of the better bats to take after Braithwaite was gone. Um, I I think between him, Jose Ortiz, and I forgot what the other guy's name was. Spies. I would think between them, they were kind of all besides Ortiz, but Spies was really kind of like Alexis. I don't have the file in front of me, so I'm kind of going off of my head. But I really think he was a great bat to take in that position.
All right. Well, let us move on to the next pick. In this, first, same as the first. Toronto takes another pitcher with the 5th pick overall in this year's draft, and that is Matthew Toland, a flame-throwing right-handed pitcher who is 20 years old. He is a gentleman with a big-time fastball, a good sinker, a solid curveball, strikeouts, just everybody. And when he doesn't strike you out, he lets you hit a home run off him. So I know the big knock on him is going to be the home runs because they were a little bit high. But this is one of the guys that I really liked. I really liked Toland in this draft. Hokie knows that. And one of those guys that I'll go out on a limb and stand by, and then end up having to eat my words about 10 years later when he just doesn't quite get there. But I really like Toland. I really like his power. I like where his movement's at. I like where the control's at. Is the control going to be great? No, it's clearly not going to be good. But I still think it gets into the 80s. And if it gets to the 80s, the power gets into the mid to upper 90s, and the control gets in the 90s, I mean, you're going to have a pretty good pitcher in your hands, even if he gives up a little bit more home runs than you would like. But certain GMs, certain parks obviously can mitigate that a little bit. So I think Toland ends up being a pretty good pitcher. Yeah, he might not be the prettiest pitcher in the draft, but I think what he does give you, there are teams out there that are going to be after him. So, PR, did you have any thoughts on Toland? I'm going to go to you first.
The only real thoughts I had on him, there were a lot of pitchers that were built like this in this draft. That Toland, off the top of my head, I know a couple of pitchers towards the end of the first round were kind of like him. Aragon is another. They're just like really very strong power pitchers. You don't know where that control or where that movement's going to end up. And so for me, it was a riskier pick than some of the other guys. Honestly, and I mean, I know that like this is just because of the way I like to play. I'd have taken Ever Salvador over this guy. I'd have taken Ever Salvador over some of the other guys picked after him, but it's not a bad gamble to take in terms of like wanting the highest potential to grow into something. But I just wouldn't have done it. It's just a little bit too much of the question marks on guys like that for me to take him that high.
Maddie.
Those home runs are extremely concerning. I mean, I think it could be to a point where he could make Berryman look like a guy who keeps the ball in the park, or a Dittmer like a guy who keeps the ball in the park. The build is there. I think this is a build that's really shown that it can be very successful when things come together. But I don't believe he's going to keep the ball in the park. I think that will be a guy where the home runs were low. He can be like a low threes ERA pitcher. But because he can't, and how much probably be, he'll be like a 4.5s pitcher.
Adam.
I was honestly, I like the type of pitchers that are like an 80-85 slash 90-90 style. Those are really my favorite style. But I was kind of looking back at some drafts trying to find someone, and Mario Vaglienti is a little bit similar of a player that St. Louis took in the 97 draft to the build of Toland. Uh, Toland gives up a few too many home runs, and I think that will kind of hurt him. But I just think the potential's there, and I will say that chances are I'm going to alter the park a bit there, just to make it a little friendlier for my pitcher. But I think that yeah, home runs are going to be a problem. But when you look at all the other things, he doesn't give up an enormous amount of hits. So once again, I will take 30, 40 home runs against my pitcher if they're all solo shots. Um, and I know that's the pipe dream.
That is a pipe dream.
That I totally get. It's a pipe dream, but there are going to be times where he loses a game because he's given up too many home runs. But he's going to win a lot of games just from strikeouts. So I will kind of take that, and I've never really cared if control's low. So that's kind of my reasoning for it. I do think it's a little bit of a riskier pitch. The only other pitcher that I really was planning on taking potentially over him is the guy that Maddie drafted in the next pick, which was Aaron Capes. And part of the reason I went with Tolan over Capes is the righty lefty. And I know it sounds kind of funny when I always talk about how much I love the lefties. I just feel like the park that I am in, Tolan kind of fits it a little bit better than Capes. But at the end of the day, those are the two pitchers that will be interesting to see how they compare when you look at the draft. And I would never have drafted Zavala.
Well, it brings us right into the next pick, and that was Maddie trading up to get Aaron Capes in a nice draft day, pre-draft day deal, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I think when you look at all the warts that Tolan has, or the perceived warts, I mean, those are the things that Capes doesn't quite have. He doesn't really have that home run issue. Home runs maybe a little bit higher than some people want to see, but I don't think it's an issue by any stretch of the imagination. The strikeout to walkout ratio is clearly not as good as Tolan's was, but it's still not bad. And again, he's got a good fastball, good slider, and a solid circle change. And the control is, he's lefty, he's younger. I mean, there's a lot of things there that you really like the way that the control is over the overall pick to the power and where the movement is. You might be a little bit better if the movement was like a one higher. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it might. Health's kind of where you want to see it. Like I really, out of all the pitchers that I scouted kind of pre-draft and then again kind of looked at a little bit since the draft happened, I mean, I think Capes is the one that I've definitely been like, yeah, I think that was one that a guy I probably would have gone after outside of my unnatural love for Tolan. So I do like Aaron Capes. I think Maddie did a good job to trade up to get probably the best pitcher left in the draft at this point. I think that Serta's good, Tolan's good. Major, I think, is going to be good for that ground ball type pitcher. But I think after that, There are some pitchers out there that are probably going to be better than I think. A lot that probably end up pretty good. But I think this one is probably the best out of what. So I think it's smart that if you have the capital to boost the capital to get up and get a guy that you're pretty sure is going to be better than everybody else. So, Hokie, go back to you. You already talked about him a little bit. Do you have anything else to add on this pick?
No, I just think really he is the perfect style lefty. I think that he has a lot of features that could put him into a Ben Logan style, which I know a lot of people didn't seem to like. Peter, for the longest time, didn't like him, but yeah, I think he's got the potential to be that very high end lefty pitcher. So nothing, nothing really bad to say there.
Peter will gladly take Logan now for your 6th next year. So just throwing that out there. Maddie, what'd you think about this pick? It was your pick, but we'll go to you next. All right, PR, we're going to go to you first.
All right, so just with this guy, I normally stray away from lefties, not because I don't like lefties, but you have to have the right things for me. You know what I mean? You have to be a Nat Larson for me to really be intrigued to take you as a lefty this high, right? So for me, Capes is 17 years old. He has the age, right? I believe he's 17. He has the age right there. The craziest thing for me is and I might be wrong, but I double checked and I probably should have triple checked. But Capes had a birthday that passed, and he did not drop. I don't know if anybody can confirm that this is true, but that's part of what I wrote in my draft grades. I've never seen that.
He dropped.
And that is, he dropped.
He did.
He dropped how much?
A point.
Okay, so all right, so then let's change it. He dropped a point. Seriously, no. All right, so like, are you looking at the skills tab, or are you really looking at like the opening day file?
So the opening file, according to my scout sheet, he was a 61.93. According to the file that I have open in front of me, he's now a 59.92. So he dropped a 1.
Okay, so he dropped 1. Wow. All right, so I missed that somewhere along the lines. Either way, him dropping 1 point and being 17 years old is nothing but a good sign. And with having all of that room there, the power that he kind of has behind him, I see it as a pretty damn good pick. I don't know if I would have made it, but I can see why others would make it. I can see why it would fit their park, and stuff like that. So yeah, like put together with that's really the reason why I would give this an A. Otherwise, if there's anything he's missing, if he's 19 or 20, if his vitals aren't necessarily there, if that drop is bigger, then this is a big no. But this is a yes for me.
Manny, your pick.
So there's a few things. One, PR Mizzy's kind of fucking with you. When he aged, he actually dropped from a 93 to a 93. And then from the draft to the extra file that Andy posted, he recalculated to a 59.92 from a 61.93, whatever he was. And as far as I know, the vitals didn't actually change, so it's just whatever mogul reshuffling the deck to show him as he truly was, kind of like how something's happened with the winter ball clicks. It's just a little inner working with mogul. Two, I think it's kind of funny the way that like people perceive the high homer. When you look at his actual home run totals, yeah, they look a little high. But when you look at his innings pitched and how they actually calculate out, if you want to do math, that's actually what truly matters. He's not a high homer guy. There is the 1 year where they are just a tad high, but it's nothing major. Especially with the other 3 years being low and the movement's not really high. Very young, a lot of time to develop. And then the last thing I really just find funny is it's like people are scared of a lefty, like that they are more willing to take a guy that's probably going to get beat around, who's probably gonna have like a 5.0 ERA or a 4.5 ERA, then the lefty that might not quite meet their expectations. I mean, Capes could fail a bit, but maybe he's only like a 3.9 ERA pitcher instead of maybe if you swap what he becomes around to a righty pitcher, and maybe if he's a righty 3.5 or 3.3 ERA pitcher. So it's like you're gonna just go like the entire opposite direction and just make sure that you have your little righty to make you feel all nice, warm, and fuzzy inside. It's goofy, but I like it. I like that people are goofy because I didn't even really look at the file at all until Friday morning. Downloaded it, looked at it, and said, yeah, ran my little file, and yeah, this guy is still available. It'd be great. Look through the picks that are made. Holy shit, he is still available. Hit up Poldy. Poldy made me a happy man. Says since I did not have to do a damn bit of scouting.
It's always a nice thing when Poldy's willing to trade down for what he's willing to trade down for. So we'll move on to the next pick, as Dave tries to tell us we've been on for an hour and we're only 6 picks in, which is false, but not overly false. And that is Texas at 7 overall, taking the pitcher Zavala. Why? I'm not sure, but they did. Most of these podcasts, as people will remember, I like to compliment my division mates when they make a pick that I'm going to regret in a couple of years. Sadly, this is not one of those times. I don't think. I see why. I think that the mass WP train wanted Zavala, the 60% ground ball rate. However, all 3 of his pitches are below his overall. All of his vitals are below his overall, except for his health and his endurance. And his stats aren't anything that are cockle warming by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't know why this gentleman was taken. I'm going to guess is maybe they look at that skills tab, but it looks like he might have had a 1-point peak drop, potentially. So maybe that's why. I don't know if that's the case though. Like I just, it's if I was allowed to put a GIF into words, it would be it's an all for me, dog. Like I don't like this pick. It's the first pick that I can honestly say that I'm not a fan of. I can see why somebody takes him, but I don't think it's a good pick. So, PR, do you have a read on Zavala?
I mean, if that control and that movement is a few clicks higher, I can see something working. You know what I mean? But to have all the vitals underneath your overall, it's not the pick I would have made here at 6. There are a lot of other picks and a lot of other guys available. I felt, it would have been better to have as a piece and less question marks involved. Zavala, what's interesting is he's got the makeup of a guy I would like. You know what I mean? But he falls just short there. So it's definitely kind of a no for me on this guy. A few clicks higher on some of those vitals, we're talking, but not with the way he's looking there.
Yeah, even if they were just at his overall or just above his overall, I think people's opinion changed a little bit. But like where they are right now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're super far below. Obviously, the control's 1 below, and the movement's 4 below. Excuse me, 5 below. But like, oof, like it's no. Maddie, tell us why we're wrong.
Yes, because you are probably, possibly, maybe. Trying to find the file. I don't have it. I could probably get it if I really cared, but I don't. But the first thought that I would have is he kind of reminds me of a Dana Belota. From what I remembered from that draft, that I passed on him just because while Belota's homers were very, very low, the build wasn't all that great to his overall. And as he progressed, he just kind of took off and became a really, really good pitcher. The type of guy that you just throw some good defense behind and just dominate. That's what I see in Zavala. The build isn't great, obviously, but I think sometimes people get a little too caught up in that, with with him having as much upside as he has, I think there is time and reason to believe he can have some really nice jumps. His build can jump beyond his over. I do think people get caught up in that a little too much. I know I've taken players that I would say have perfect build to what their overall is, and then eventually the overall overtakes the build, and you're just wondering what the hell happened. So I mean, it can kind of happen, in both ways. There can be there can be those guys that where their overall just develops, too much past their build, but other times can go in the other direction. So I
Adam?
wouldn't worry about that.
Honestly, I'm not a big fan of Savella. I genuinely don't usually like to have um, like the control be below the overall. Like I like something to be above. So uh, I totally agree in some ways with Maddie in the sense of yeah, if he jumps, then people are probably going to want him for that. But I think the 85 health kind of increases the peak a bit. He has never like outside of when he's 15, he doesn't have an ERA under 4. Um, and, and when you look at his college numbers, he actually had some of the highest OBAs in his college level, had wild pitches. I don't know. For me, there's just a lot of things that I don't particularly like um, for that reason. And just looking back, Colorado took someone in a few drafts called like Chuck Hughes, and I'm pretty sure he's not doing anything now. And a lot of the build has some similarities to him, but the 60% ground ball is going to be good in Texas. I just don't see him ever being a top 2 pitcher. I see him potentially being a 4 or 5 on a decent team, but I would never want to build my pitching staff around him. So that's really about the only thing. And um, uh, with Texas being a big hitters park, I'm kind of surprised they didn't kind of lean towards that, because a lot of the other pitchers later in the drafts are kind of hit or miss. There's no other pitcher that really stands out after you get past those first 4.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this was good for Chicago because it allowed Craig Nevis to fall to them with the next pick overall. Craig Nevis, a 20-year-old left-handed hitting and throwing first baseman, it was just one of those great power bats that you want. So I really like this pick. It was one of those things that I was sitting wherever I was sitting, and Mike reaches out. He's like, he's like, here, who should I eat? Like, what should I be thinking about? I'm like, I didn't even look. I didn't even know who was picked. I wasn't paying attention, honestly. I'm like, if Nevis is there, take him. Like, because I knew he'd already taken the 2 other bats that I really liked. And when you have 3 of the top 10 picks, your goal should be one of 2 things: either to get the best top end of the rotation you could possibly get in one draft, which was kind of hard in this draft because there were some good pitchers and he could have gotten 2 of them, but chose not to. Or take the 3 best bats you can get, and I think he got the 3 best bats. I mean, I think he cemented the corners of his outfield with some incredible talent, and then cemented a corner of the infield with an incredible talent. So I really like. And again, when you have 3 picks in the top 10, you really should find a way to not fuck it up. And I think he did that because I think he got 3 guys that should play for a long time in that West, or in that Central, division. So, Maddie, what did you think about this guy?
Good bat go boom.
And Adam, what did you think? Because I do not mind the Maddie short answers because that way we're not here all night.
Yeah, he's another guy I considered at 4. I know I messaged Fred and someone else about what their thoughts are because I suck at drafting hitting, and yeah, I think that is easily the best pick here. And uh, you know, Y guy made some really good selections with the top 10 picks.
Yeah, I agree, and he definitely didn't ask me about any of them. So, We will move on to the next pick, which is 9 overall, and that is Oakland taking Scooter Burge, a relief pitcher at 9 overall. Adam, I know you and I were talking about this before the pod officially started, when it was just you and I here. And both of us, I believe, agree that he was not the best relief pitcher in the draft. Honestly, I mean, he's a top 5, but he might be 5. I don't like this pick, and I don't understand this pick. And I'm an idiot that takes relief pitchers way too early in the first round on almost a yearly basis. Don't get me wrong, but I think there was guys taking another second and probably in the third that end up as good, if not better, than him. I'm going to leave it at that. Honestly, I don't like the pick. He does have 2 good pitches. I do worry about his power for a relief pitcher. I mean, his stats look great, but I don't think he becomes the pitcher that Doug really hopes he becomes. I mean, I think this is a guy that, if he gets just over that 80 control, you're thrilled, and then everything else is just kind of gravy. And he ends up being maybe a solid reliever, but definitely not a guy that was worth 9 overall, even in a draft where 9 overall could have gone one of 1,000 different ways. So,
Yeah, I mean, just talking about him quickly, like, do I think it's the worst pick because it's a relief pitcher with 85 peak in the top 10 picks? I feel like he could have got him in the second round, but yeah, I don't think he's going to be a terrible pitcher. I just don't think it's the right pick at this spot. I think there's a lot of better pieces that Oakland could have got in the draft, and still gotten him. But yeah, I don't absolutely hate him, but I also don't think he's the best relief pitcher when all is said and done at the end of it. So unfortunately, this is one of the worst picks, in the draft, but not the worst.
Maddie.
Yeah, I'd pretty much echo what Hoagie said. I think that he should be a pretty solid reliever, but not a great one. And I think in order to take a reliever this high, they've got to be just a knockout stud closer. Not that. He doesn't have a ton of power. I think he should develop some. That'd be pretty solid. But I'm kind of concerned that his ground ball rate is only at 25%, and he doesn't. He's not one of those guys that screams that he's going to be like a 70+ power guy. And that's, at least in our file, that's a power reliever. So this kind of has me wondering what gives. Is he actually going to be a high homer guy or a high opponent's batting average guy? I think one of them will show up, and that's where it'll be just a solid reliever rather than a really good one.
All right. So we're all more or less in agreement on that. So we'll move on to the next pick, which is 10 overall. Cincinnati taking the Sheriff of Nottingham, a lefty pitcher. It shocks me as much. I think it shocks anybody else. Theo takes a lefty at 10 overall, but we'll see how that plays out for him. And now I pause to see that if he actually freaks out.
He's a righty.
But he was. I know he's a righty. I just put that in there specifically so that when Theo listens to this, he freaks out, thinks he accidentally picked lefty, and then runs real quick to the file to double check. So, Theo, you're welcome. Anyway, Earl Nottingham, a right-handed 17-year-old pitcher. So 17. I know as soon as I hear that, Gilly's ears go up a little bit.
That's not all that goes up.
There it is. So a sinker first pitcher with a good fastball and an okay curveball. I mean, again, he's a power pitcher with some decent control and movement right at his overall. So I mean, he's a guy that you kind of like the projections you see. The home runs, as many will point out when you actually math it out, aren't bad. The strikeout to walkout ratio, I don't think is as good as you want to see in a power pitcher, especially with the power that high compared to everything else. But I mean, you see the potential here. What you're hoping for is you're hoping for that 80 control and the 90s power movement. I'm not sure the control gets there. I mean, he's young. I mean, he started the file at 16. He's 17 now, so he definitely had a drop along the way. It looks like it was only about 3 points, so not a bad drop to have. I think that if I had to find a comp for him, it would probably be my own guy, McMurdered, as Dave would like to call him, who was able to get to that 80, 90, 90 kind of range. So, I mean, if Nottingham gets there, I mean, he could be a very useful pitcher. I think the question really becomes how high does that control get? Does it get high enough that it's usable? Or does it not get high enough and kind of just ruins him with just that one missed vital? So, Maddie, what do you think about Nottingham?
He's really, and by that I don't really mean that I like him, just that he's interesting. Some things that I would take away from that is he's obviously a power build, but he has a ground ball rate of 40%, and usually those guys that are extreme power build do not have ground ball rates that high at all. As we know, once they get to the majors, that can go up a little bit, so maybe he can get to like 45%, which will be pretty good for him. Another thing that I noticed is that 3 of his high school years, he has a very low opponent's batting average, and with only 52 movement, that's pretty damn impressive. He fell from a 93 to a 90, so it's either a 3 or 4 point drop. So obviously some time to develop, but only 17 now. He's just, I guess he's a perfect pitcher if you're coming to the point of the draft, which I don't know because I didn't scout, but to where you get to the point and go, I don't really know who to take. I don't really feel strongly about any of the other pitchers. Let's take this guy since he's real young and see what the hell can happen. Because he does project to have low 70s control and then 90s power and movement. Which, if that control does get a little bit better, which is what can be seen with these really young guys, that could be a pretty good pitcher. There obviously is a lot of risk here with this pick, but I think the way Mogul does things with pitcher development, there's a chance for him to also be pretty good.
Okay.
I mean, he's basically one of those players. I think that you kind of throw a dart and hope that he progresses well. He's got a ton of upside. The only pitcher in this draft that had more upside was Fitzmaurice, and there's things to like more about Nottingham. Like Maddie said, with his on base average against, especially as a went. Um, so I think he has a lot of the potential. It's just whether he ever hits it. And Theo likes his right-handed pitchers. So worst case scenario, he's going to stay in Cincinnati and be somewhere, and probably a better choice than Alan Rose ever was.
Ouch, but honest. All right, we'll move on to the next pick, and it is Percy. The Padres are picking next, 11 overall, and they take Jeff Westgate, a 20-year-old left-handed hitting and throwing right fielder with a big arm, decent glove, and all that power that we like to see. Contact is low. When it's versus righties, it's kind of where you want to see it. It's at 61, so the chance of it getting over that 70 number is pretty good. But I like the power build here. Like I like he's gonna have probably the lower contact with a lot of power and probably a lower eye. So, and by lower I mean like he'll have probably an eye in the 80s, I guess, with really high power, and then the contact that probably overall somewhere in the mid 70s, but definitely gets to that first righties well into the 70s, which means he should hit pretty darn good. Was he the best bat still on the board? There's those guys that the PR kind of teased about earlier that were still on the board at this point, with Jose Ortiz, and the other one was Joe Spies, who I think that both of which might end up being better bats in the long run. But I like this pick. I think that when you get a lefty that can hit a lot of power and can play the field, you take that shot. So I think this was a nice pick at 11, and just building into that farm system that Percy has building out there in San Diego that I not going to lie, a little bit excited about. So there was one other player I thought that he could have taken. This is a similar type player that went much further down, but Westgate might be the better of the two. So I think Percy did a good job here. Adam, what do you think? Or Maddie, what do you think?
Yeah, I really like him. The power is obviously there, I think you feel kind of warm and fuzzy inside that there's a pretty good chance of that contact getting at least good enough. Say, as my projection suggests, into the mid 70s. I would agree with that. I think his eye is actually really, really good. Really like it because he's a bit of a high strikeout guy, not extremely high, but he's gonna walk, and that's something that where, at least if you're not gonna hit a homer, you're gonna draw some walk. The one concern that I would have is he has some years where the double totals were very, very low, and there was a first baseman that went to the Diamondbacks years and years ago, like Alberto Zamorez. He was a guy that was like he could hit like 30 homers, which is great, but he's gonna have like 5 to 10 doubles. When you can't get to second base like at all, it's a concern. I would rather take a guy who's going to hit 30 doubles and 25 home runs over, just ultimately selling out for the long ball. However, with Westgate, there are some other years that you'd think that one homer year, his junior year of high school, is anomaly. But yeah, good bat, can play the corners. He'll suffice out there, especially with the arm. If you really want some more range, better fielding, you can move him to first base and find there.
I know for me, I just hate this type of build. Mainly because I never get the players that work out well. So not saying that the build's not good. I think he's going to have a lot of power. I just always end up drafting a player like this that ever ends up having like 70 contact and hits like 189. So at least if that's the case, he has a good arm. But he's really going to be kind of a DH, maybe first base as Maddie said. But like like you kind of said, Spies and Ortiz are both types of players that I like a little bit more. Even like if you look at Eric Dacker, that was a little bit later. It's kind of another type of build, but with more power. So yeah, I just think they're. Oh no, never mind. Has less power. Yeah. So pretty much, I think there's some other outfielders that kind of are more well-rounded as types of players, but the fact that he's a left-handed or left-handed hitter is going to help because that contact's a little bit better against the righty pitchers.
Yep, I agree. And Daiquiri was definitely the guy that I was referencing as a guy that I liked that went later in the draft. So, but Atlanta is next on the board at 12, and they spies with their little eyes a left fielder named Joe. Joe Spies, a 19-year-old left fielder, goes next to Atlanta. I call him a left fielder because I'm very liberal with that term. He is a DH slash first baseman who could dabble in left field as needed. I had a gentleman named Basil Carnes for a long time who I trotted out left field like he was God's gift to left field. He was not. He just had a nice stick, and I didn't mind putting him out there. I think Joe Spies falls into that category too. He has a nice stick, and you don't mind putting him in left field to get more nice sticks out there into positions that you really want them, like DH and first base. But I mean, this is a guy that projects to have really high contact and power with that low 80s eye. Like, it's just one of those righty bats that I know for a lot of times that I end up taking or Maddie ends up taking, and then years down the road,
No.
like, oh, how do we miss them? So I think that bats are going a little bit earlier, especially in a draft like this, where I think it was maybe more bats than pitchers, or at least more projectable bats than projectable pitchers. That I like this pick. I like Spies. I think he could end up being a pretty darn good hitter. I mean, he's a guy that's going to hit probably as many doubles as home runs, but in my books, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with those righty masters that hit 20 doubles and 20 some odd home runs. Do I want a guy that hits 40 home runs? Sure, everybody does, but I'll settle for a guy that's going to just kind of smash the ball. And I think that Spies probably does exactly that. Matt, let's go to you first.
Well, the projections like him. Definitely give him credit there, so he could be good. If he gets through where the projections is in like mid to upper 90s contact, about 90 hour. that'll be good. But the drawback from him is sucks at defense. Want him over Westgate. I think you're a little brain dead. Just the low strikeouts is what just concerns. If the contact gets into the upper elite level, it won't matter. But if he doesn't, I think it's going to matter. It's just going to always give you that impression that he's going to be just an amazing masher, and he's just going to be amazingly solid. That would be my concern with him, with those low K builds that just doesn't have some big striking, really fast, really good at defense, amazing power. If you have something that's really good with those low K, I'm willing to overlook that, but I don't see anything that's overly amazing.
Stang. Or not, Jesus. Hokey.
Wow.
Yeah, that just it's getting late.
Hokey
Yeah,
wishes he could be
apparently.
Sting.
It's okay. There could be worse people to be compared to than Stang. I mean, after all, his name is named after horse penis. Because that's
To be
what he
fair,
was.
this was Stang's pick, so
Yeah.
it wasn't a reach for me to mess that up.
Anyways, when I look at spies, I basically look at somebody that is a little bit older than Ortiz. So I did like spies. And yeah, his fielding is, you know, average, and it probably won't develop much, and you almost have to DH him. But I still really like the pick, and once again, I will definitely take somebody that hits 25 or 30 home runs as a good season and matches that with doubles. I don't think you have to have 50 home runs every season to be a good player. And I do kind of like spies. And when you look at the other pieces of the draft, I don't think there's a lot of other things that stick out. I think when you look at it, I like someone like a Spies a little bit more than a Monroe. Just based on my personal preference of builds, right? So I think Stang did a pretty decent job there.
Unbelievable. Bashing Maryland like that after all these years. Anyway, we will move on to the next pick, and that is Florida, who is no longer Hokie, no matter how often I keep trying to make it so. And they take Ever Salvador with the 13th overall pick. Now, this is the player that I'm glad Texas didn't take at 7, because I think this pitcher ends up being more the pitcher that they wanted to see. This is a guy with a high ground ball rate. Good curveball, solid circle change and fastball, and kind of that clear control movement build. I like this pitcher probably second most in this build category. So in that ground ball category, probably the second best in that category, potentially the second best in that category. No home run issue to speak of. Pretty good strikeout to walkout ratio for a ground ball guy too. And the OBAs are relatively low most years. So I like this pick. I also like the weird name, Ever. Got to be a good nickname in there somewhere, but I'm not going to worry about it because I don't have to nickname any of my guys because I didn't draft anybody this year, which is a lie. I think Andy got 2 guys off the list for me, so I will have to nickname a couple guys. But I like this pick. I think that if I'm going after a ground ball pitcher, this is probably one of the guys that I target. So PR's back, he's told me, so I will let him go next. What do you think about Ever Salvador?
Well, I like him. I think people are not surprised for me to say that, but overall, this guy's name in Spanish means ever the savior or ever the Messiah. So I think people in Miami are definitely hoping that he turns out to be that way. I think that, and I said this before, but he had a 2-point drop, which is always means good things. And with the right development, he's better than Mainzer, who I took at 2. So I was really trying to figure out a way to kind of get back into the first, maybe like the later first, to see if I could nab him before the second round came up. But HH had different stories, and I think I got to stop talking about the people who I like because a lot of them are just getting clipped really a lot earlier that I'm anticipating. But I think Salvador is a great pick. I think it's an A pick for the spot. I think it looks like a reach with his peak. But if he develops the right way, which he's obviously shown if he drops 2 points, he's going to get there. And if he gets there, he's definitely going to be quality and probably startable within the next 2 to 3 years. So we'll see.
Maddie.
Yeah. So I think Everclear will be a good major league pitcher
Nice.
on the ground ball rate. You like that? The 2 point
I
drop
do.
is good. That gives you a little, 12-point upside. You want to do the maths on that. That should be anywhere from 4 to 6 years to develop. Makes you feel a little warm and fuzzy inside to think of what he can be in the major league level. And also, if you ever have a chance to see Everclear live, don't.
Well, that ruins it for me. We'll go with Adam.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is the type of player that does well in the Florida park, or most parks, but I think he'll do exceptionally well in Florida. I also think that he was the best pitcher remaining. So, once again, kind of a good place to go here. I thought that he might go a little bit higher just based on the fact that some people like that kind of build, but yeah, I definitely think great selection there.
All right, and we will move on to the next pick in the draft, and that was the Minnesota Twins at 14, taking Frank McGilligowie,
Wah, wah.
a 20-year-old left-handed pitcher. I mean, that's basically what I felt about McGilligowie too. So the was doesn't really seem to have a home run problem. Doesn't really appear to be able to strike anybody out. Um, has a high ground ball rate with big control, okay movement. Pitches all seem to be kind of where you want to see them ish. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this pick. I think for me, it is the super high control over everything else for even for a ground ball pitcher. And it might just be me, but I swear that these type of builds never work out well. And I know there's people that will be like, nope, here's the build and here's what it'll look like. And it very well might be. I was not a fan of this pick. I just don't know how he does once he hits the major leagues. He might end up being a very good pitcher, but this is just not my type of guy. Just because I've been bitten in the ass with this type of build before. So, Adam, you're the pitching guru. Let's go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's some things that I like about him. The ground ball percentage, the 74 control. I always like that style. His movement's still above his overall, so if anything, he's got a lot of space there. Uh, if we're talking about Tolan being an absolute disaster with home runs, I kind of feel like this guy also is. The 12 home runs and 88 innings with a 302 OBA. That's kind of your warning sign there. But I think really what kind of comes down to him is he had his birthday already in February. So basically, if he doesn't get a jump, he probably drops to like 82, 81 peak. And that's great. But also, it's a little bit lower. I think he's going to be a decent pitcher. I'm kind of curious where he kind of lands. And this might be, you're looking at pick 14. You still have other basically players that you could throw darts on to kind of see how they actually do um, before doing anything.
Maddie.
He sucks, especially considering you trade down 8 slots and you take this fuck. That's a really high control to movement gap. Don't really see him making up that. The home runs, like Koki pointed out, yeah, they are a little high. I think when you kind of see the sort of limited upside that just exacerbates that little problem. I I could see him being solid enough, sure, but I mean, we have not seen him age. He aged in February, so it's before that March 1st file. We really don't know. We would suspect that he's not going to drop very much, but could drop a lot. There's nothing compelling to really want to take this guy this early to me, other than the ground ball rate, and that's not going to be enough to ever sell me on a pitcher.
All right. Well, we see mostly improvement on that, so we move on to the next pick. Jesus, we're just Pitt. Taking the catcher, Jamie Weingartner. An interesting pick here, 17-year-old catcher, again, air quotes, who has very good fielding, okay arm, okay handling, decent eye. Not really sure where. So I think I understand the bat part of this. I mean, I think the at least batting wise, the comp potentially is maybe what Alakar ended up looking at with kind of the low 80s power and control, and then the low 90s eye, which for a catcher is a good bat to have. My only concern is defensively, how good is he going to be? Is he going to be able to throw out enough batters? Is he going to be able to handle the pitchers well? I just have a couple questions. And again, maybe that is not GB's concern. Maybe GB really fancies him as a first baseman and thinks that he'll do very well there, and that his bat will be enough powery to kind of overcome anything that might otherwise be a detriment here. Because I mean, when you look at those AMI stats, he's hitting more doubles than he is home runs. So I thought this was an interesting pick here, but generally speaking, GB knows what he's doing. So surprised he didn't take a pitcher. Surprised he didn't take maybe one of the other bats that I think are clearly more a bat. So I'm gonna. This is one of the ones I kind of have earmarked as a wait and see kind of guy, curious to see what I'm not seeing in there that somebody else might be. So, Maddie, what did you think about this pick?
It's interesting. It's kind of like a pick that I made last year. Granted, I took a guy who did not have near as much upside in Pierce, but similar guy who is not all that it doesn't look all that great defensively. Looks more like an offensive guy. So maybe GB is just trying to be like me, to kind of go a little off kilter when we usually look for guys that have a really strong arm. But I will say that Weingartner does project to have a pretty nice offensive build. Projects into the low 90s contact, 80s in power, and the mid 80s eye. That should play very well if he gets there. The question will be the defense. How good will it be? But there are ways to make up for a lack of arm, if you want to, or exacerbate the problem of having a poor arm if you want to tank, or even a good arm if you want to tank. You can do those things in a file to just kind of help out your cost. So I think it'll be interesting to see will that work out? Will it not? Even if it doesn't, as a guy you can probably slide to first base. It'll be at least tolerable.
Yeah, good point. Pokey.
Yeah. Apparently my mic was down while I was eating chips, so my bad. But you know what? It's interesting. A lot of people don't like this type of build with the high fielding. I wish his handling was a little bit better, because then he'd kind of remind me of Jose Pineda, who I really liked in Florida. But he's going to have the bat. I don't think that the arm is always uh, the most important thing unless you're against a team that steals a lot. Just because when you have everyone trying to build this like super 40 home run team with 70 speed as the height, uh, arm doesn't mean a whole lot. And I think maybe that's kind of the build he's trying to go is, who cares about the arm if people are just kind of building those tanky people. And for that, you kind of have to know the type of division that you're in. That being said, I don't think that division is like that. So to me, that's a little bit of the scary thing. So GB usually, even on the picks that he misses, they're not complete disasters. So here's to hoping Weingartner's not bad.
All right, 16 overall. We finally reached the midway point here. The Dodgers take Fred Steve Harvey, a 19-year-old second baseman who wins the biggest jump before the draft award. Mr. Harvey before the draft was a 70-85, and then as you can see on draft day, has jumped from that 70-85 to a 72-93. So he got the big jump. Looks to be a strong defensive second baseman. Doesn't quite have as much speed as many people want to see at that position. But he has a little bit and probably enough to kind of help out in the field a skosh. But he's a nice projectable bat. I mean, this is a guy that projects at least to have pretty good contact with a little bit of power and a decent eye. Like, one of those, what people would probably call an average a second baseman. Probably not a second baseman that people are going to be like super thrilled or super excited to have. Maybe ends up looking a bit more like a Sebastian Herrera than somebody else. But Herrera had a couple of very good years after he peaked out. So, I mean, if that's what he ends up being on the high end, I think you end up being happy with this pick. But it would be interesting to know kind of, for SXR, if this was a guy that was on his list for the jump, or if after he jumped, they kind of caught his eye and then he took. So, an interesting pick. I don't think it's a bad pick. I definitely see where I think the pick could be going. And it could be a decent player. So, Adam, we'll go right back to you first before the chip attack happens again.
Yeah. Honestly, I kind of liked Harvey. I think he's a worse version of Joel Hawes from last year, or whatever his name is. But I do like him a bit. He was another person that I was debating early on, just because I kind of like that defensive build. In the end, I didn't go that route because I also don't draft second baseman well. So yeah, I think he's going to do well in LA, and I think there are a lot of things to like about him. I would say the biggest downside to him is the fact that both his contact and power are below his overall. So he may never really be the big hitting type of player. So if that's the case, then most teams will either pick a second base or shortstop to have good defense and low hitting from. So if he's going to have a second baseman that doesn't hit extremely well, he's going to want to find a shortstop that can hit.
Maddie.
Looking at my projections, kind of leads me to believe that he's always going to be the guy that everyone underestimates because he might not have the greatest looking offensive vitals, but he'll always produce. The reason why is because he'll have pretty solid power for a second baseman, and that'll always keep his OPS right there. He won't have a lot of home runs, but instead of like that speed build where they have like almost no power, he'll have decent enough power. I don't know. I hate to put a big number on it, but I'd say like 15 home runs, So that will really help out his offensive production, obviously. But I think that will be the reason everyone will go, well, he doesn't have great contact, he doesn't have great power, his eye, whatever. Who cares about the eye? He'll play good defense, probably put up league average offensive numbers, and all that combined is a pretty good second baseman in there.
Yeah. Like I said, if he ends up being Sebastian Herrera, you're happy with that. I was very happy with the years that I got out of him before he just randomly up and fucking died for no reason. So the Blue Jays are next at 17, and they take Jose Ortiz, who is a guy that we've mentioned a couple times, is a bat. Again, another guy that masquerades as a left fielder, probably more of a DH/first baseman. Got that nice double home run power kind of stuff. Like, this is a guy that you like to like. I think the problem with him is if he was a lefty hitter, he goes picks and picks and picks ago. Like, he goes even earlier. But these are the righty types that they tend to fall sometimes a little bit farther than some might expect. I mean, this is a guy that projects to have a very similar bat to Joe Spies. I mean, I think Joe Spies and Jose Ortiz here end up looking near identical in the end. So I think when you miss out on Spies earlier on, or maybe Spies goes earlier than you expect, see Jose Ortiz still sitting there, you grab him. And at 17, with some room to grow. I think it's a good pick. I think it's a nice pick at this part of the draft, especially considering how the rest of the draft goes before this and then really past this point. PR is saying that he's the closer you're going to get to the next Kevin Kent. Eventually, PR will stop sucking Kevin Kent off, and he'll be able to play some baseball. So we'll see what happens with there. But Adam, it's your pick. I usually go to you last, but I'll go to you first since it's your pick. What stood out about Senor Ortiz?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, he's 17. He seems to be well rounded. His fielding's a little bit better than Spy's, in my opinion. Like, he might still be able to play in left field. It could be hit or miss, but his numbers in high school are relatively decent as well. He does strike out basically on par as his walks, so um, I don't think that's going to be a big problem. But that is always something that I do have issues with, as Maddie knows, in understanding how good someone's eye is going to be. But yeah, I just kind of went this route because I think with 31 upside at 17, he was just another player that kind of fit when I was expecting my team to kind of do well in a few years. So um, yeah, that's kind of the way I went. And PR usually drafts decent hitters, so I kind of went that way. I don't know if Kevin Kent is necessarily the upside.
He's not.
Yeah, I drafted Kevin Kent, and I honestly didn't think he was going to be necessarily as good as what he came. But who knows? I don't know anything about hitters, so I just hope he's decent enough for me.
Maddie?
Yeah, this is a classic Hokie offensive pick, and then they just meh. Um, you know, the guy that nothing strikes me amazing about the power. It'll be solid. I don't care that it's 8 above the overall. I care more of that it's only 3 above the contact. And just knowing how that'll develop, the contact will easily overtake that. The eye is just complete shit, really. He has such low strikeouts that he's not going to walk much. So basically, you have a guy who can't play defense, not going to walk much. You can't really run. The power isn't anything great. So basically, you're putting all the eggs in the basket of him hitting like 325. He does project to have some pretty good contact. I still question he's going to be that good of a hitter. And I think that's what he'll need to be in order to be a real productive bat.
All right, well, another sit and watch and wait and see. It'll be fun to see. Next up in this draft is 18 to St. Louis, and they chose James Princess Leia, a 21-year-old lefty who is going to turn 22 here in December from Boston, Massachusetts. He is a guy that is a pitcher. I can't knock this pick because I'm pretty sure I made this exact fucking pick last year in Mark Dolette. So he's a guy with all of his vitals below his overall. One really good pitch, and that's about it. And then one crap pitch. His stats are okay. Home runs are fine-ish, minus that last year, I think. His strikeout to walk ratio is pretty damn good. All of his other stats are very good. Again, but it's how much upside does he truly have? It's a trick question, Maddie. I can do the math. I know how much he actually has. So it's a question of how much can he grow? What can he do in the limited amount of time that he has to do it? Does he get a really big jump and become a really good pitcher all of a sudden? Does he have enough time to get 2 decent jumps in before he kind of peaks out? What's exactly going to happen? My guess is that he ends up looking almost identical to Max Dola, and they will peak out around the same, kind of the low to mid 80s across the board, and are just meh starters, or in the case of what Doulette's doing, the attempt to become a relief pitcher to kind of save his value. So that would be my thought. I don't know. Again, GD has his own thing. He tends to know what to do with pitchers, so I'll let him go on that. But had I a James Leia, that would be the way I go with him too. Is try to immediately turn him into a closer, and use that new pitch strategy count thing to make his value increase exponentially. So, Maddie, what'd you think about Leia?
He's a player. Jim Leah. He's also, if you break the name down a little bit, he's a bassist for a British glam rock band in the 70s. Yeah. There's really not much upside at all. Did he already jump?
No.
Good. I really wasn't listening to what you were saying because you might have already said that. But
No,
still, that's not very
I
much.
went back and looked too because I'm like, oh, in 80, 90, I don't remember seeing that. No,
That's not much upside at all. I mean,
no.
that's a guy who, it looks clear as day. Like you're going to get like 1 or 2 years to develop. If you get 3 out of it, you just got lucky as hell. There's just not much upside on him at all. I don't. Obviously, with that build, you think you get 1 jump out of him, plus your window boost, and you've got a guy who's going to make a major league roster, but nothing more than just a number 5. The amateur numbers are amazing, but I would hope so when you don't have a rating below 76. So yeah, you're gonna be and then the fact that you're that good and you still gave up 17 home runs last year, that might be good because your ERA didn't really suffer at all. But that'll be a problem in the majors because the major league hitters will make that really be a thing.
Yeah, completely agree. Adam.
If he becomes a closing pitcher, then I can somewhat like this pick. If he stays a starter, I don't think I can like this pick. And that's really about it. And in a lot of ways, I think it was worse than Scooter Burge.
Oh, I don't think it's worth. Again, I made this exact same pick about 7 picks later last year in Max Dillette, and I immediately turned him into a closer because I think that's where his value may lie. So we'll see. We will absolutely see. But I don't think, Jermaine, that he has enough room to make that tankersly run. But yeah, I think he peaks out next year. That would be my guess. But Arizona next, 19 overall. They take Willie Argon, who is a 19-year-old pitcher who's a power pitcher. Not quite the pitcher you would expect to see Ren take. Ren tends to take those guys that with low home run totals, which he does have, but tend to be the more ground ball type pitchers. This is more of a power type pitcher, a more hokey St. Louis, Seattle type pitcher. So a very interesting pick to see out there in Arizona. A pitcher that I first glance kind of like the look of. Yeah, his control is below his overall. Power's there though. Movement's kind of where you want to see it. He's got a slew of decent pitches. The question is what route does he end up taking? And again, I think this is another one of those guys that you're really hoping for that 80 control and 90s across the rest of the board kind of build. If he's one of those guys that can get to the high 70s, low 80s with control, and then the low to mid 90s in power and movement, he can end up being a very good pitcher. So I think that's what Ren sees potentially in him, and really what he's hoping for out of this pick. So, Maddie, we'll go to you first, and then we'll go to Adam as I go refill my water. What did you guys think on this pick?
This one just kind of makes me laugh a little bit because this is something where RH kind of really hounds you on trade talks when you kind of bring up a pitcher to them that they really need to be a low home run guy. Really would like a higher ground ball rate guy. I see that he has a couple of years that are pretty low in the homer. But this just seems one of those picks of like you preach to us that the pitcher's got to be a certain way, then you take pretty much the guy that you've kind of declined to take from us various years for that reason. So it'll be interesting to see, is this a guy that's just not meant for Arizona? Or will he be a guy who, with those low homers his last 2 years, is actually really good out
Adam.
Yeah, I kind of liked him. He was another person that I was kind of looking at early, but in the end, I just kind of went with the idea that his control and power are well below the overall, well, two below, and I just thought other people were safer picks, but I think at this selection, he is a decent looking person. But like Maddie said, anytime you talk to Ren, this doesn't really seem to be the type of pitcher that he's looking for. So kind of an interesting choice. I do think he's going to be a decent player, but I was a little surprised not to see him go more of a hitter at this pick.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see. I think this is a build that could end up turning out well for him. But you're right. Maybe he doesn't end up in Arizona. Maybe he ends up as fancy trade bait somewhere down the road. So San Francisco up next, taking Nat Fitzmaurice, a 16-year-old Zachary Wickens, basically. I mean, I don't have Zachary Wickens up in front of me right now, but I'm going to guess they're very clonish. So a guy that's 16, a lot of room to grow, but kind of a tight space to grow into. That's kind of my thought on him. I'm assuming Senior Wickens has finished his transformation out there in San Francisco. I think that is this. Nope, still not peaked. Look at that, Jesus Christ! But I think this is the route this guy takes. A control that struggles to get into the 80s, and then a power and a movement that just don't quite get where you expect. A guy that ends up with a high peak, high overall, and just kind of a very tantalizing looking player that never quite materializes into the player that you want to see out of him. I think that's where this Fitzmaurice kind of turns into a very similar, if not identical, player. Adam, what was your take on Nat?
Yeah, I kind of feel like he's a bit of a dart, as I said earlier. I think he is a larger dart than Nottingham, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a terrible pick because I think, this kind of late in the draft when you have someone with such high peak and the fact that it's, 42 upside difference, there's a lot of potential growth. And I mean, he's one of the lowest overall people at 16. So his home runs are going to be like his stats look like garbage because he's such a low overall. So uh, I really just kind of say I don't think there's a lot you can project other than he's going to be a hard throwing right-handed pitcher. But outside of that, there's no way of knowing where his numbers are going to land.
Yeah, you know if you're smart.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know anything about pitchers, so.
Exactly. I think everybody says that about you all the time. So, Maddie, what's your take?
I like it. I dig it. Yeah, the build sucks ass. I have buried these builds in the past, but enough of them have succeeded. Yes, 40 at a 45% ground ball rate. That's really interesting for a build like. Just makes you think that Mogul knows what's up and something's gonna go right, and this guy's pretty good. I wouldn't be surprised if he sucks ass, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he's really damn good either.
All right, and we're to that part of the pod where a 16-year-old is going to mogul because mogul, 16-year-old. So, for those playing the bingo at home, that should be one across. Next on the block is the Texas Rangers taking first baseman Nick Monroe, a 19-year-old left-handed hitter, power hitter. Excuse me, going to Texas. This is a guy that definitely has the home runs over the double totals. I think the only question is, and there shouldn't be too much of a question, is how high that contact gets. I mean, this is the same problem we have with most of these lefty power hitter builds that have that lower contact, but good power and eye. Where does that contact end up? Does it end up in the 80s? Does it end up in the mid 70s? I think this guy's another one, just like a lot of the ones we've seen already. Probably ends up in the mid 70s for contact, with the upper 90s for power and the 80s for eyes. Which means that if it ends up the mid 70s of contact, his first righty should probably be in the upper 70s or low 80s, which means he could end up being a very feared hitter when all things are said and done. Sometimes these guys don't quite hit, but I like the pick. These are the type of bats that I go after all the time. So I like the pick of Nick Monroe here. I think it's one of those nice projectable lefty bats that you feel pretty confident in. Even if he hits, he's going to hit, and if he just misses, he's still probably going to hit pretty well. So a nice, comfortable, almost safe pick here at 21 by Texas. Matty, what was your take?
Yeah, power bat gonna hit. If you're gonna miss out on Nevis, this is not a bad guy to land.
Adam.
He's going to hit pretty well in Texas, and pretty much the same as both of you guys said.
All right. And now we move on to back-to-back pit picks. The first pick is Sean Brooking, a shortstop, who this is one of those guys that I always don't know where to place. He is a 70-81 with not a lot of speed, but a really good glove, good eye, and okay contact at 19, and he's a switch hitter. And as you can see, he goes here at what are we at, 22 overall. This is a guy that I think you see in that range somewhere. Sometimes somebody takes him in the 20s. Sometimes he falls into the mid to back 30s or the early 40s. But just somewhere in that range they always go, and I can never quite peg where appropriately. So this is another guy that also has a birthday coming up in September. So it'll be interesting to see that if he gets a jump between now and then, kind of what that jump is and then what that drop is. So this is a guy that you'll probably be able to have a very good take on before the year's out and kind of know exactly what you have from him. He also appears to have had a 1-point drop at some point between the opening final and now. So that is a little bit interesting. I know in the past that the non-birthday drops have always stayed away from, always played fire, danger, hot with. I know Andy has had a take on plenty of podcasts, or he does not have that same opinion. He does not mind the 1-point drop. He relishes it for some reason or something odd like that. I am probably misremembering or fake quoting, but nevertheless, all in all, I mean, I can see why you would take him. I'd probably take him too. It'll be interesting to see. Again, another guy with a shorter window, but doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be a bad player. I think the one thing is that his speed's solid, probably best suited for fielding, not as much for stolen bases, but an interesting pick. It'll be interesting to see kind of how he develops this year, because I think that's going to really tell us exactly how he develops overall. So, Adam, what was your take on this one?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I think he's going to be pretty decent shortstop. To me, he doesn't seem to have a ton of upsides, so um, I don't think he's going to be like the greatest shortstop, but he's definitely a great piece to kind of build around. So, yeah, overall, I don't hate the pick. He was definitely on my list. I just never really know if that's the type of player that's worth a first round draft pick, or whether you try to hope you get him in the second round.
I'm waiting for somebody to say Bud Lang, but we'll see. Maddie, what do you think?
Yeah, you're waiting for me to say it, but I'm not gonna, because also you. But I think I hate the pick more than I like. Just simply, I think it's too early to pick a guy like this. Really, where I would circle my wagons around is the fact that he only has 65 health. That's something where I just see his health being that low. It seems like a guy is going to start like 130 games a year if he doesn't spend any time on the DL. 65 health, he's probably going to get injured. So, how much are you going to be able to really count on him being in the starting lineup? I think it's interesting where people they don't want to see the real high health because it takes away from the peak, but at the same time, real low health, and they can't ever stay on the. It just I think he'll be with the defense, he'll be good enough to at least throw in your starting lineup. It's a question of how often is he actually going to be able to start for you. because of that, you'll need a pretty good shortstop on the well to pick up the slack.
I was not at the draft. I was at work. Was GB drunk again this year or not?
It's possible just because the guys you take are kind of a little off kilter for him. Not that I don't too
This
much.
was a
but
pre-draft pick, just a heads up. So he must have been drunk all weekend if that was the case.
It really could have. Got to hit the high life.
That's right. I did forget the pre-draft actually made it pretty damn far, so that's which was good. But I just I've grown accustomed to certain GB picks, and so far I'm not seeing him in this draft. But let's move on to his next pick, which comes up next, Eric Reed, and see if that bucks the trend a little bit. And at first glance, it kind of does. Kind of gets back into that expected GB type pick range with Eric Reed, a 17-year-old left-handed pitcher. Who is a control first, power second, movement third build, who also has a high ground ball rate. So, interesting build just off the top of your head. A quick look, 3 pitches, all above his overall, which is nice to see. Not far above, but all above. Home runs seem to be kind of where you want them. A couple years there, maybe borderline. Strikeout to walkout doesn't quite exist most of those years. Very Jekyll and Hyde-ish. So you could also drink for those playing the home game. Wait for me to say that. And as far as his projections, I mean it's a tough look just off the top of the head what he kind of projects to. But my guess is that GB is expecting him to be that control movement ground ball rate pitcher with power. One of those unicorn-ish kind of pitchers. Somebody that has really good control and movement, and also a little bit of power to go with it. So, if that's what you get out of this, another one of those pitchers goes in the mid-20s to GB, and everybody wants a couple years from now because they just look really good. So this is definitely that GB type pick that I've been expecting and haven't quite seen up to this point of the draft. So, Pokey, we'll go to you first again.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like this pick over the other Pittsburgh picks, just based on that. I think Reed can be decent, but I'm kind of curious to see. I feel like at this spot there were some other pitchers that I kind of favored a little bit more. Honestly, the starting pitcher I got in the second round is somebody I like more, but that's just personal preference. I think GB probably gets something tangible out of this draft pick.
Maddie.
Yeah, I really like the build is very interesting. A good ground ball rate. The homers, they're a little high, but be 17, 52 overall. You get a pass on that. I think this is be a guy that GB takes at this point in the draft and turns him into has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah, this is definitely has that GB feel kind of pick to it, which one of these days I'll just start drafting those players before him and just do us all a favor. So probably not going to happen, but one can dream.
No, it won't, because you always like those random power builds that
I do.
You dream of being great that suck ass.
Yeah, and those are the guys I always get or trade for, and I'm like, I'm gonna fix them, and then I don't. I'm like that with that one girl that always wants to fix the guy that he just Never mind. Anyway, so next up in this draft of drafts, we have I almost said Minnesota, but that would be wrong. Montreal picking 24th overall, taking Eric Dackery, a 21-year-old left-hander. A little bit odd seeing Gilly take somebody this old, but fuck it, I guess it is what it is. So this is a gentleman that already had a birthday and already had a drop, and it was a 1 or 2 point drop, more than likely, from that 94 or 94 plus to the 93. This is definitely a guy that I liked quite a bit. I had mentioned it to a couple people, I think Adam being one of them, pre-draft. This is definitely a guy that I think people aren't paying attention to, and they maybe should be a little bit more. Got a good bat, a lot of power, will have a decent eye, have decent contact, and he'll be able to field. Is he going to be the best fielder out there? No, but is he going to be better than a lot of the DHs taken before him? I'm a bit of a fan of Daiquiri. I think that, again, he strikes out a lot, especially compared to his walks, but he hits a lot of home runs, and he should hit decent average and have a pretty good slugging and OPS. I like him. I like the pick quite a bit, actually. So, Maddie, what was your think on Daiquiri?
I mean, there's some reasons there, like you said, why I should like him. But for whatever reason, I can't get extremely on board with. Reminds me of a guy, and the name slips me, but I traded for him with the Indians from Chicago years ago. Kind of looked like this. Like the eye was extreme strikeout build, had some really nice power, and while he hit some dingers for me, the defense was pretty solid. It just never put it all together. That's what I would be concerned with. You have these reams of him hitting lots of home runs and it making up for the OPS as well as with the walks. It just doesn't all come together and have a solid outfit.
Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, honestly, as I said previously, I don't like these type of builds. The good news is he can play defense. He's got a good arm and range. I mean, it appears that he can't actually catch the ball particularly well. Although his glove work's 77, so I'm not sure why the fielding is so low. But yeah, I don't do well with this type of builds. I definitely see the appeal for people. I do kind of feel like he's somebody that needs to put everything together in order to be very good, especially with the fact that his contact is so much lower than his overall. Um, but I'll kind of slide into the next pick and talk about Jeffrey McCarthy. And I actually thought McCarthy was a better player than uh, Daiquiri. That being said, it definitely sounds like you like daiquiris. So I know your thoughts, MZ.
Well, here's the thing. I actually had McCarthy one spot higher in my hierarchy over Daiquiri, but I mean, I like Daiquiri better, um, just in a personal preference kind of way. Because honestly, when you look at the way that they are compared to each other, Daiquiri's going to have more power, but McCarthy probably going to have better everything else. He's probably going to have a higher contact. He's probably going to have a much higher eye. And his power is going to be less, but not to the point that you don't want to touch him ever again. So I think that McCarthy is far from a bad choice. I think he's definitely more DHy, obviously, or first basey than anything else. I mean, you probably don't want to roll him out there into right field, um, but it's not a bad pick. I mean, I definitely think that this is a guy that ends up having a lot more contact than some of these other power builds. I don't think he's got the power that he is, and so I think his contact kind of increases more than his power does as he progresses and ages and such. So this is also another one when we're talking about McCarthy. The next pick to Houston has a birthday coming up here. So not the sim tomorrow night, but the sim Thursday night. He will have a birthday, so it'll be a kind of a tell-all, I think, with him on that one. So depending on what that drop is, you're either okay with the pick, thrilled with the pick, or looking at that bridge longingly over the pick. So we'll see what the next couple of sims take McCarthy as he compares out to some of these other guys. But both these picks, I like Daiquiri better, but McCarthy's far from a bad pick. Maddie, what was your thought on McCarthy?
Well, my first thought is, why the fuck hasn't TT ever sent me a gallon of cane sauce? That's really what my thought is on this pick.
Because he doesn't like you.
Well, then he can fuck off and still send me a gallon of cane sauce. That has nothing to do with it at all. Just do it. That's all I want. And I'll not win games with the Angels because of that. Not that it's not happening right now. But McCarthy, he has that really high eye, which I want to like, because you always at least draw some walks when you're not doing other things. But I've seen these type of builds just suck ass because everything kind of seems to just, well, the eye seems to absorb everything else, to where the contact and power. Even if they look decent, they just don't do anything. He's like, it's like these builds are like they're afraid to swing the bat, so they don't, and just draw a lot of walks and do nothing. And the fact that you can't play defense hurts that too. You don't want a DH that just goes up there, takes the ball 400 times a year, and doesn't swing the bat.
Not so much, but to each their own. At least he landed in Houston. Detroit next takes Colin Hank Moody, a 20-year-old second baseman. Here's your second baseman with a little bit more speed, and not a lot more speed compared to the last one, but a little bit more speed. Good range, right-handed hitter. Should be interesting. I mean, the bat looks okay on paper. The college year that he just had looks a lot better than some of those high school seasons. But when you're looking really at the overall on this guy, what are you expecting, or what could you potentially expect? I mean, again, I think this guy is one of those guys that ends up being like almost a straight average-ish kind of across the board, which ends up making him pretty solid. A guy that has maybe low 80s contact and like that mid 70s power, with the mid 80s for speed and eye, and then just a good glove, good arm, good range, good fielding. Like, so, when you look at this guy, I think it's definitely one of those guys that we end up saying, why didn't we think of him earlier? I think he ends up being a solid second baseman starter, if not potentially a good second baseman starter. Again, I never factor in winter ball decisions or potentials when I'm looking at my draftees. But I mean, this is definitely one of those guys that looks pretty solid now, could be pretty good, and with a good winter ball could be even better. So definitely one of those late round picks that I think some people start to wish they'd thought more about as the years progress. Adam, what was your thought?
Honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of Moody. There was only like one second baseman that I was interested in the entire draft. So for me, I think it's just the fact that his righty lefty splits are so uh, different. He's going to really only be good against lefties. So, uh, there's that. His speed is good, but he doesn't have good base stealing or steal tendency. So that doesn't really matter. And his fielding is, once again, above average, I guess, or average, depending on how you want to look at it. So he doesn't really do anything extremely well. And maybe I'm completely wrong, and he turns out being a complete stud. That would not surprise me based on my history of second baseman. So, yeah, that's really how I saw him.
Maddie?
He projects fairly similar to Fred Harvey. The vitals are there for that. The power's not quite there. He's faster, so I think it kind of makes up where the power isn't there. The eye and contact are both very similar. I think this is a pretty good pick. It's going to be amazing. He's a guy, you get him on base a little bit, and you can do some things there. And
Yeah, well, two or three of us agree with it. He'd be pretty good. So, we'll see what happens. Florida is up with the next two picks. Florida takes Keith Simon and then Istoro Montevio with back-to-back at 27 and 28. And this is a far-flung difference from their last pick of Elver Salvador, who is a clear ground ball pitcher. This time they go two power pitchers. And as a huge fan of power pitchers, I really don't like either of these guys. If I'm just being honest, I mean, Kevin Simon has the potential for the build that I kind of like, with that control, then power, then movement build. But Isdoro just, I think the controls doesn't get anywhere close. I think it's one of those guys that ends up having really high power, solid movement, and then the control just nowhere near kind of where you want it or where you need it to be, for him to be a guy that you can rely on. Um, I'm just a bit surprised. I almost wonder if he had gone off a list for this draft, because he seemed to do well with that first pick, and then these next two, I question a little bit. Simon's amateur numbers are pretty poor. Home runs don't seem to be an issue. There was one year where it would be classified maybe as high, one every 6 innings. The rest don't, but that strikeout to walkout's just non-existent. He's walking about as many as he strikes out. OPA is high most years. I just not a fan of his. And then even with again Istoro, the next guy, some of the stats look a little bit better, but the home runs definitely seem to be high, and the strikeout to walkouts quite aren't there. Like I don't know. I don't like either of these guys, and I love sloppy power pitchers, but neither of these guys strike a fancy. Maddie, what do you see? Do you see anything different in either of these two?
No, I pretty much see it the same way you do. I think Simon's a guy you'd probably give a pass if he's like anywhere from 16 to 18. You say, oh, okay, there's a chance that he could be something. Nothing in the stats makes you go, oh, no way. But since he is 20, that makes you go, not as confident that he can become something, even with that upside. Just mogul, whatever reason, just loves those really young guys like Gilly does. And the other guy that he took, I don't. Hell no. The
Yeah,
build, the home runs are high. The ground ball rate is extremely low. It's just a concerning thing that something he's gonna fuck up. Maybe he can survive in Florida. This could very easily be one of those Florida builds that, yeah, he's good there, but as soon as he goes anywhere else, dog shit.
yeah. Adam.
So I kind of like Kevin Simon, but also part of my thing with him was that his numbers look absolutely atrocious for amateur stats. I think he needs kind of a hefty jump, but to hope that he becomes good. Um, which I think at the end of the first round is somebody kind of what you're looking for. And then Monteo's kind of the same thing. I think both of them are going to be home run issues. With Monteo, the part that I don't like is the 20% ground ball rate. Um, Even in Florida, that's very hard to come by. I usually found personally that anything below 30 to 35 usually was a bust. So there is that.
All right. Well, all more or less in agreement on that. So sorry about that, HH. We will move on to the next pick, which is the second to last pick in this round. Boston taking Tim Tom Thibodeau, a 20-year-old left-handed pitcher whose birthday is coming up here in August. But it seems to be one of those power pitchers. Good, really good fastball, decent circle change, and okay curveball. Just like the last two power pitchers who I was not a fan of, I'm a little bit more lenient on this one. He did have that first year of college where he just gave up all the home runs. But so it's just one of those things, I think. But I like him a little bit more. I think he projects to be a little bit better than those last two guys that we were talking about. Not a lot better, but I think he has a chance to get that control in the 80s. And if he does that, then the rest of the stats and the vitals kind of come along, and he ends up being a solid pitcher. Nothing great, but solid. So, Adam, what did you think about Mr. Thibodeau?
Yeah, I'm not surprised he went there just because when Fred and I were talking, I know he really liked Capes. And although Capes is a better pitcher, there are some similarities between them. I and obviously Fred also has Anderson that he just will never give up. So I'm not surprised to kind of see this pick. I don't think it's a terrible pick. I think there's a decent chance he becomes something. once again, it's just his ground ball's low, and he has that 1 year where home runs just ballooned. So and the on base average was really bad that year as well. So it's just what type of left-handed pitching do you get? Do you get the one that's the 19-year-old college guy, or do you get the rest that's the same? And I think at the end of the day, he can potentially be in the low fours, high threes ERA, which is not a bad thing at this pick in the draft.
Patty?
Yeah, I think he has a similar build to Capes, Toland, whatever. Yeah, Toland, whatever. So there's similarities there where he could produce pitcher. The ground ball rate being pretty low is. I think the home run thing in his freshman year of college is quite interesting because I noticed Mogul seems to do that. Like you have a guy that's nothing really major going on in high school as far as the homers are concerned, and then freshman year of college he just gets beat the fuck around. You see, sophomore year of college, hey, not that bad again. It's interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how he develops. Will that 1 year really make a big difference, or will that be like the Mogul learning curve, like I've seen it be? I would kind of agree with Hokie. I don't think he's going to be a great pitcher. There's not that upside that makes me think he's going to be a top of rotation guy, but still a quite interesting arm. Do note, at least college, the Ks are pretty close to the innings pitch. As far as I really noticed with the stats, you don't see that all too often. It seems like their numbers are always their K rates, even if they are a power pitch, are a good amount below the innings pitch. So that to keep an eye on could be one of our little earmarks for when we look back at this draft to see, does he turn into an amazing power pitcher?
It'll definitely be interesting to see, and as Matty mildly alludes to it, at some point here in the upcoming weeks, Matty and I will be doing our 10-year review on the draft from 10 years ago. So look forward to that at some point in the near future. Does bring us, though, to the end of the first round and pick 30 overall, and that was Jay Main, our editor-in-chief, taking Alan McGrogan at 30 overall for the Milwaukee Brewers, a 20-year-old right-handed hitting power hitter. And you see those power home run totals just increase as those years go on. I like McGrogan. I like this pick. This is definitely a pick that I would make it a similar position, a guy that projects to have good contact, big power, and a solid eye. Like, a guy that other people might overlook because he's right-handed, and that the fact that he doesn't really have that a defense that you want to see, but he'll play a solid first base, and he has some predicts at third base. So maybe he's one of those guys you play over third base for a while to get more ratings, and just hope things work out even better for him with that. So I really like this McGrogan pick here at 30. I think there's a picks here in the 20s and even in the late teens that McGrogan might have been a better pick for them. So love this pick by Jermaine here at the end of the first round in his quest for 3. So Maddie, let's go to you.
This is interesting because when I look at him, I think, he could be the right-handed Thurtle, and Thurtle was really, really nice power bat, lots of home runs. The fact of him being a right-hander, maybe he's not his Thurtle, and maybe he still could be. But I'll say this, for being picked at 30, I don't think you can really go wrong here. A lot of upside there. The power is going to be there. Nothing to really be concerned about that. That contact's not going to be good enough, especially with the splits not dramatic at all. This is a guy, kind of one of those picks. You think, how did the guy slide this far? People always they want to go for the speedy guy or the really good defensive or the pitcher who was not going to be good, but you kind of force yourself into taking a pitcher, and you realize the first baseman that you thought you were just going to second or third round, first round, and puts up 30 bombs and 100 runs.
Yeah, and there's these types in every draft, guys that go later or slip further, and people just aren't paying attention to because of those exact things you mentioned. I mean that these types are littered throughout our file. I mean, Bob the Builder Downs was taken 30 overall. Mark Edwards taken 26th overall. And the list continues. There's just a ton of these guys. Todd Bryant recently called up to Seattle, 30 overall. Like there's these bats that are just taken late, and every year that people just pass on. Everybody just wants to suck off the Clark Kent's of the world because they were taken 4th overall in the draft. When there's guys just as good, if not better, taking the end of the first round. So it's very interesting to watch that play out every year. But Adam, we haven't forgotten about you. When you round out the first round for us?
Yeah, honestly, he was somebody that I did kind of have my eye on when I was making a list for the later round, and I was trying to get another pick in the first round, and he was kind of an interesting piece. Honestly, the only downside, and part of the reason that he slipped to pick 30 is the eye, being 65, and I think when all is said and done, he has the potential to be the best first baseman in this draft. I think when you look at him, he has a lot of things that are stellar. He looks like he can play third base a little bit. He'd be a little bit better than Osmert Snow, just if you ever need a third baseman. But um, yeah, I do think he's going to be a big slugging type of player, and I don't think it's a terrible pick this late.
No, I think it's quite a good pick. So that brings us to the end of our first round. And I know for Maddie and myself, we did not scout overly much for this draft. So we don't have any gems to look forward to in rounds 2 and beyond. But I do know that the second round is where PR makes his money. So what we're going to do here is we're going to end this podcast here at the end of the first round. But what we will do is we will allow Aoki and PR to take over the reins and move on and kind of do their second and beyond recap for you all. So I'm going to end this here. So good night, everybody. Good luck on the rest of the season, and may all of your draft picks be as good as Clark Kent. So good night, everybody.